So, something as being off grid, homestead kind of lifestyle people, something we hear a lot of people tell us is, oh, when the world goes crazy, we're going to your house. And no. And a lot of people kind of have that idea that if the world goes kind of crazy in whatever fashion that it may, that they're just going to go to someone else's homestead, someone else's off grid, kind of self sustainable community. And they really don't understand how much extra that would be to put on the system of that off grid or homestead community. So when it comes to we're talking about building community, and there's so many different ways and types of communities that people want to build. Sometimes it's just a regular community in the city where it's just groups of people who get together type of community. Then there's like you have survivalist communities, you have certain religious communities, you have the off-grid homesteading communities. And when it comes to building these communities, that's something that a lot of people want to do. They want to build community. And I feel that there is a very romanticized kind of aspect to building a community. Um, Not that Brandon and I have been like super trying to build like people live with us kind of community, but we kind of have. But in not only our experiences, but what we have witnessed, what we have heard from other people trying to build a community, there's a huge issue of people actually being able to get along and really work together in order for that community to function and for the infrastructure, so to say, of that community to be able to handle everyone who wants to be a part of that community. Dale, hello Dale. Thank you for joining my live today. Thank you everybody who is starting to show up as well. Um, but the hardest thing about deciding, for one, it's deciding to build a community. Is that something you want to do? Is that something you want to do? Because building a community has there's so many layers to it. And in a lot of those layers, it's a lot of risk. And that risk does revolve around the people who you are bringing into your community. Um, and so when it comes to those risks and the people that you want to bring into your community, it's it's kind of one of those hard things because you want your friends and your family. It kind of depends on the situation, but most of the time you want friends and family to become part of your community. But the problem is knowing the people you are bringing onto your community or bringing into the community, because everyone in the community needs to have some sort of niche or job that they do to keep that community running, especially when you're doing the off-grid homesteading kind of aspect. So, like, kind of an example that we have dealt with is, say you go, hey, community or the people I care about, I want to grow a garden for everybody, but everybody has to help with this garden. And a lot of times, what'll happen is maybe they'll be there for a minute in the beginning, say to do the planting, but then they really don't want anything to do with it, but they'll only come back when it's harvest time. So they don't want to actually put in the work to grow the thing, but they still expect to get the fruits of that labor, even though they put very little labor into that garden. And so when it comes to trying to pick who you want to be on in your community, it's a gamble because you can know someone pretty well. But then when the stresses of kind of the off-grid homestead life start coming in, they can definitely change their tune. And because there's so many different ways to build things, if you're starting from scratch, that's definitely one of the hardest places to start because everybody has to acclimate to the lifestyle and they actually have to do the work to make life function. That is what kind of city life and plug and play houses have kind of taught us, that life, like, it's very wonderful that life can be very easy. You can just turn on a light, you can just turn on the water, versus when you're building homesteads, you may have to haul the water, you may have a well, and you have to be more careful about your water usage. You can't take those long showers anymore. Especially like with women who like to straighten their hair and use a lot of the appliances that need to be heated. That's really hard on a solar system. So you have to have enough solar if you want to blow dry your hair. There's so many different layers to the things that you have to kind of unlearn when it comes from going from a regular house with water, with electricity, and switching over to the off-grid lifestyle. You really have to learn to be able to acclimate your habits to the lifestyle. And a lot of people really struggle with that when they realize that there's no on-demand hot water. When if you can't just like go to the store at any time during the day, their tunes may change when it comes to the work and labor that is required to get a homestead or off grid kind of community up and going. It takes a lot of time, a lot of work, effort, practice, patience to go from the beginning to where everything is kind of stabilized and can handle the community that you have brought in. And you can't have just kind of random people join that community in the sense of if you don't have the infrastructure to support another person, you either have to like it's always good to overbuild, but it's about um like someone said, lots of adjustments. Yes, you have to do a lot of adjusting for more people, for who's there, for who you're bringing in, or if you plan on bringing more people in. And the hardest part is knowing what people are going to do during those adjustment periods, because some people will start off great and then it's a downfall from there. And there could be many reasons for that downfall. Everyone has, you know, in a community, if you're going to start a community, you really have to understand that everyone's going to come in with their own attitudes, their own belief systems, their own baggage. They're bringing their baggage with them in certain ways, and the off-grid lifestyle can definitely, in a sense, it can bring out the worst in people and what they can kind of mentally and physically handle, because like the part of the acclimation to Arizona is it's hot and it's dry, and that can be something that can drive you nuts. Like it could be really frustrating with how hot it is, not being able to cool off the same way you could in a home that has AC that's plugged into the electrical grid. If you're off grid and you have an AC and you're using solar, you may not be able to actually use that AC, and dealing with it being that hot can change someone's entire attitude about kind of the situation. And people are very kind of prone to changing their minds. So when you're planning on building a community, I feel that you really want to start with yourself. The like Brandon and I, we're starting with me and Brandon, and we want to build everything up to the point where it can at least mostly support us, the system, whether it's the water catchment, how many chickens we have, how many goats we have. We've kind of already fine-tuned some of those aspects, but since we moved to Arizona, we kind of have to start over. But we want to be able to support and sustain ourselves so we know what the system needs for us. And of course, there is some overbuilding just in case. You always want a little extra just in case. And when it comes to building community, I feel that it's instead of trying to bring people in, not not by force, but saying, "Oh, hey, we're going to buy property together, we're going to build a community." I don't think that's a very good way to go about it. It's more of those, if you build it, they will come. And so, working on building your own situation, off grid, homestead, whatever kind of community you're wanting to build, as you build it, you're gonna you're gonna want to meet the people around you, the closest communities, the closest towns, meet people out there, um, and build community in that sense. Build a network of people that you can communicate with, trade with, share with, and build community more outside of kind of your homestead off grid community, whatever you're doing, before you really try to pull more people into the fold, because, community isn't just people people who have the same goals. Because you could have two people or two groups of people who both want to be off grid homesteaders, but when it comes to them coming together, they have a way different vision for how that would go. So it's a lot of kind of understanding human nature, and like we have to all be honest with ourselves. We know what we would do in certain situations, and how we might, how our attitudes might change, what we can handle. And going off grid, what can we give up, what creature comforts can we give up in order to build this system that can bring those creature comforts back in. And some people really can't. In a sense, some people are just meant to be city people, and some people are just meant to be off grid people, and you can flop back and forth. But some people really struggle going from city to off grid, because in the city, everything's just right there. You can just walk across the street to a grocery store. Versus off grid, if you need to go to the store, it needs to be an entire day that is planned, and you need to have enough reason to go to town. Not, you can't just go to town for milk. Like, that's a silly reason. For like us personally, part of it is like, if you have a lot of money, you could go to and from town all you wanted. But, you need more than one reason to go to town. You have to live without a certain thing until you can get to town, or projects have to be put on hold until you can go to town. And like, just the community aspect, people always think that people will just come together and get along and it'll be this wonderful, sweet community, when just our kind of experiences has proved kind of the other side of it, because people really have trouble with understanding the work it takes to make a homestead function, and especially function and supporting many people. And there's so many different ways of that support. Some people, you can still have a job and be off grid, but say you're working to build a community where people don't have to have the regular 9 to 5 job. So when it comes to, like, for me, if people come and stay with us, they want eggs, they have to help with chickens, because it's that balance of work and reward. And I work my butt off to get those eggs from my chickens. And if someone wants to also enjoy those eggs from the chickens, I expect, in the sense, for them to help me clean the coop. At least, like if they're going to be here for a week, I'll probably clean the coop once. I would kind of hope and expect they'd be like, yes, we'll clean the coop. And they have paid for their eggs. I got help, they got eggs. And that's kind of the balance in communities that needs to be found, is what work is expected of people, and not just so they earn their keep, but it's more so that the system can run smoothly while supporting everyone. Because even if just one person isn't pulling at least some weight, it's a lot more weight on everybody else. Because if it's one person taking care of all of these chickens to supply everybody with eggs. Like, you could probably do that to a degree if you had a designated chicken tenderer, but you still need everybody to know how to take care of those chickens, understand the chickens' needs, the process of checking their health. Like, everybody needs to know that and be a part of it, because if they're never a part of it and one day they have to be, you might have a huge problem because they don't know what they're doing. So it's like it's the division of labor, but not to pay your way entirely. Like, that is part of it. But everybody needs to have an agreement and understanding that they can't just kind of float along when it comes to being part of the community. They need to engage, help, they need to work. And a lot of people these days have trouble with that. And that is something we've definitely had problems with in the past, is they expect that they can just come and hang out and use all the things, and that's just more work we have to do to support them. I mean, it's the same way if, like, you have your 40-year-old kid live in your basement who doesn't have a job and just plays on a computer, you have to support them. You have to input so much extra energy into them, and that can wear you out, and that can make the situation kind of tense. And there's definitely an absolutely necessary need for everyone who becomes a part of a community to know that they have to do some type of work, because you can't just do nothing. And it's a self-reliant thing. Like, if you're going to do an off-grid homestead kind of community, each person has to be self-reliant to a degree, because if they're not able to take care of themselves, they can't help take care of the homestead, and that just is more work for everyone else. And it's a lot. It can be a whole lot of work, even just one extra person who doesn't do anything. Um, got some comments. Dividing the job amongst everyone is hard when some people work 9 to 5 jobs versus the ones working for themselves. No, yeah, exactly. Hi, Brandon. um, that is the hard part, when people work the 9 to 5, and that is something we're kind of like, makes the lifestyle a little harder because we don't work the regular 9 to 5 and have that constant income. But that's why, like, Brandon's consulting, I sell chicks and I sell eggs. So there are ways that you can try to work around not needing the 9 to 5. But also, that's just where it takes a lot of discussion between the groups of people. And that's where it gets even harder, because it's really hard to get everybody to agree unanimously on how things should be or could be. And it's it's a really kind of frustrating thing, because sometimes, like, I definitely will slack off sometimes, and that's just us. And when I slack off, that's extra work for me or for Brandon, and that can be frustrating. And I think if we had a community of people where you had more than one person doing that same thing, as depending on kind of, I don't want to call it a hierarchy in a community, but there does need to be some sort of kind of like leadership. And like, if it was your property that you bought, you're kind of the leading role, so to say, of your property. And if someone's slacking off, in a sense, it's your job to either set them in place or to keep up with what they're not doing. And when it comes to community, that can cause a lot of rifts and fighting. It's just like kids and chores. Like, I did dishes last time, it's your turn to do dishes. And like that kind of issue when it comes to who does what. And sometimes it can be like, and people have their own egos, what they think they should do, or, you know, they think that what they do is worth more than what someone else does. And like, that's not how it goes, because even though your job may seemingly be more important, without that lesser important job, if they didn't do that, the system wouldn't go, it wouldn't work. So like, everybody's job is equal. Everyone's job is going to play a part in how the system runs. And like, it goes back to that kind of romanticized thing. I see a lot of people, I want to build a community, or I have land, come and stay at my place. And that's where I want to kind of went off tangent a little bit to where I was going earlier, but it's not only the risk of how people are going to be and act kind of after the fact of starting a community, but it's the risk of, you can know someone very well, but you still don't know anybody. And when it comes to off grid, kind of the prepper aspect, having a lot of people know the situation of your off-grid homestead, like, say you have a perfectly sustainable off-grid scenario and you have these people living with you, and someone turns into a bad apple, and they could mess with your homestead. They could try to steal things, they could try to ruin things. And if you kind of went into, like, if the world did go crazy, now you have a person who knows your situation, who could try to like take over. They could get a bunch of other kind of bad dudes and band together and come take over your homestead. Like, there's certain things that, like, when it comes to wanting to prep for the future, have a homestead, being sustainable, you're in a sense, you're a target when it comes to kind of the prepper aspect. um Mud fossil. It really does take a village. Uh, it really does take a village though when everyone inputs so much more can get done. No, it's and that's the truest thing about it. Like, it does take a village, especially when it comes to, like I was saying, if you have bad people, if it's just Brandon and I, and a group of bad people wanting to take over the homestead, we have way less chance of being able to handle that than if we had a village, a community. And that is kind of what sucks about how hard it is to build community is because, like, I mean, even when the world isn't crazy, like, I mean, it's kind of getting crazy, but even now, it is a village. It takes people coming together to make things work. And we're social animals. We are meant to work together, but we are kind of in a time and a place where it's really hard for people to work together. People really get kind of their egos and just kind of their panties in a bunch when it comes to um who does what, division of labor, who in like it's just that issue that everyone's value is the same in the sense of we're all working together to reach a common goal. And sometimes it is important to just help out for the sake of helping out. And I think that's where you truly build community is not trying to bring people together in like an off-grid fashion. Like it's a great way to create a community, but it's also working with the people around you. Working like your village doesn't have to live right next door. Like you don't have to be houses lined up. Your village can be all the other people who are off grid and homesteading and helping each other where you can, because I think there's been kind of a misconception maybe about like what helping someone is. Helping someone is to do the thing just to do the thing. Like usually, helping someone, it just makes you feel good and hopefully it makes them feel good. But that's kind of the end of the transaction. There's no I owe you or you owe me for helping. But there is also the aspect of, I did help them. I'm not expecting, I'm not requiring, but I do hope that some point in the future there will be reciprocity. They will want to return that favor in the future. And I feel that that's kind of a sign how someone would work in a community is how freely they help people without expectation. And because people who are really big on IOUs or, you know, I'll do this, but you have to do this for me. And you can make those kinds of exchanges though. Like, you can say, oh, I'll help you do this, and maybe you could help me do this. But at the same time, it's more of just a desire to help build, to grow, to create, to do things together versus the kind of I owe you or I did enough work where I should get X, Y, and Z. And that's where I think a lot of issues happen in a community is just people's individual price tag and cost of work. And that's where it just gets really tricky on how you bring people in, who you bring in. And, if just I'm sure many of us, just as an example, if we were to go off grid and bring our family members who we know really well, we would probably have a good idea of the issues that are going to arise. Like, unless in a sense you're already a really good, tight knit family who can work together in that kind of sense. But at the same time, like, for example, if you were building an off-grid community and your aunt was a very high maintenance person, who always needed her nails done and needed, like, always wanted to blow dry and straighten her hair. It can be really hard to get a person to understand that if you want to do this lifestyle, you might have to give those things up for a while. And depending on how they take that, like some people are like, "Oh, I can't do the off-grid thing if I can't do this specific thing." Um, Mud Fossil asks, what is your gear for? So my gear is just exactly kind of what for gear is for uh, kind of the prepping aspect, but also just kind of the lifestyle a little bit. We haven't really gone many places now that we're in Arizona. We used to come to and from the property all the time, and it's just nice to be prepared And again, it's kind of a little bit that prepper aspect. I like to have my gear in case I need it. Um, and MG, the Amish are a good model for community. They are, and that is the thing is it's very possible. But the kind of a difference between the Amish and say Americans trying to come together and create a community in whatever fashion, the Amish have been doing the community thing like that for a long time, and they never really stopped. Versus we as, I mean, not just Americans, but just like most people around the world, we kind of stopped those communal living together type of systems. And I find that it's just like they're definitely a great uh, model, inspiration, but you can take all that inspiration and try to implement it with maybe not random people, but family or the people, your friends come together and buy property. It it's a huge difference to see it functioning and to get it functioning, if that makes sense. Um, Mud Fossil, I did invite family. It didn't go so well. Yeah. And that is the tricky thing is like us as humans understand that humans can be very secretive or devious or have false intentions. Um, just that kind of idea. Because just like example, we had someone in the past who's like, oh yes, I'd love to do this with you, and then they bail out. And since that bailout, we're stuck with doing it all in just kind of that basic sense. And or you start a community and someone just they throw their hands up and they say, I can't do this lifestyle. And now you have to decide whether you're going to keep on doing it alone or without that person, or if that's going to cause you to give up. It's really a I feel that the off-grid homestead lifestyle, like the acclimation period, it brings out the worst and the best in people. And depending on how far the worst or the best kind of goes, it can create a lot of issues when it comes to the acclimation period because it's not only acclimating to working with solar, working with hauled water, working with having to deal with the elements more than because like we were in a tent for a while. Not a lot of people can live in a tent for a month. We went not quite a year. No, I think we were about a year in the tent. Not a lot of people can do that and deal with tent life for a year while they build their house or while the community gets established or that kind of thing. And if some people will try and they'll start out good, but it wears on them and they can't do it, and that kind of leaves the other people in the community. It's like if you have a team and you start this job as a team, you're like, okay, it's going to take this long to get this far. But when you lose a team member, you can only get so far. And then you lose another team member and it keeps kind of setting you back. And oh no, where was I going with that? um, it's hard to it's really hard to know what people are going to do going off grid until you actually do it. It's definitely one of those things where you could be like, I'm going to get land. So Montana is a great example. There's some people, I'm going to get land in Montana and I'm going to homestead on that land and it's going to be awesome. There's this romanticized view. But then they buy the land, and even if it has a cabin, like say it's a land that already is at least partially set up, the first winter hits and you see the romantic videos of homesteading in the winter and it's beautiful and it's this fantasy kind of thing, but then you're actually you bundle up like an Eskimo to go check on the goats and you're freezing and you got frozen snot on your face and you're frustrated because your feet are so cold while you're trying to deal with this goat. And it can really stress you out. It can, like, just for example, homesteading in the cold in the winters is like it's wonderful, but it's awful. It will definitely test your limits in ways that you did not know your limits could be tested. Like a lot of people never think about having to go check on the animals a couple times a night when those nights are -70. And those people who are like, "Oh, I'm going to homestead and it's going to be kind of this easy thing," are going to get a swift kick in the tootsie to find out that it's not that easy. It's not that romantic kind of aspect. Like you really have to put on your adult boots and do it. And if you can't do it, and that's not exactly a negative thing, it is truly finding out what you are capable of, but it's being able to make it through the worst times, the worst acclimations, like understanding, oh, Montana winters are really cold and they are not a lot of fun, especially when you're like totally off grid. Like you can't just like call up your friend to come over real quick to help you deal with something. You can't just turn on the heater to warm the house up. You have to be like for us, we were lucky with our earthships in Montana. They kept us very warm. I can't imagine living in a cabin and having to keep a wood stove burning all night. Otherwise, if it's -70 outside, your house is probably going to get just as cold at some point if you're not up all night feeding that fire. And some people can do that. Some people, it wears them out. They can't handle those types of stresses. Um, MG just hit 1 year anniversary of trailer life in the hills. Skirting it today for winter number 2. Heck yes. Happy 1 year anniversary. I definitely have to say that like Montana is kind of a joke. Is if someone buys property in the summer, you know they have more chance of making it in the Montana homestead scenario, if they make it through their first winter without selling their property. Because there, I can't tell you how many times a property would be bought, and then it would be like the first big snow or the first big cold snap, there'd be a for sale sign on that property super quick. And that's kind of one of the things. If you can get through, it's kind of like, you're testing your own gumption, I would say, is if you can make it through the worst parts of homesteading, community building, whatever it is, like if people are going to stick with you and stick with it and just keep grinding through, like you got the stuff. And in a sense, it's okay if you don't, because everybody's different, everybody wants different things, and sometimes things just need to be built up to a point. Like, so instead of living in a tent, you're going to live in your house and you're going to build the house off grid. So when it comes to the switch over, it's not as huge of an acclimation. You don't have to give up as much. In certain ways, you can cheat some of the hurdles, maybe so to say, but it's a lot. Oh, I think someone just wrote what I was going to say. JS, off-grid living is definitely a lot of work. What keeps you and Brandon passionate about living this lifestyle? A lot of things. So I was gonna say that like off-grid living is a lot of work, and that we get to work for ourselves. I would say that is pretty much what keeps us passionate. We get to live and kind of exist for ourselves. And it is that challenging ourselves, seeing if we have what it takes to be able to handle the scenarios we are given. In Montana, it was 8 years of dealing with insane colds for long periods of time. And down here, it's definitely kind of the flip side. It's really hot and dry, and like we've talked to people, and it's kind of the same thing in Montana. When the cold comes, that's when people give up and leave. Here in Arizona, it's when the heat comes, people give up and leave. And it's definitely shown just for us that it's just what we love. We enjoy doing it. I like being able to grow my own food, harvest my own meat. I know where that food is coming from. Just the city life, so to say, is just not we don't like it. We don't like the busyness, the too many people. You don't have elbow room. You can't do what you want when you want. There's HOAs you have to follow. There's all these extra taxes you have to pay for. There's, city life to a degree. It's very confining when it comes to being able to kind of live and exist as you want. And it's just fun. Like it's fun to be able to have goats, to have chickens, to collect eggs all the time, to have a garden, to be able to meander a chunk of property just because you want to take a walk at a random time in the day. But like even though we love the life and I don't want to say we make it look easy because if we do, I don't mean to give you that impression. We've definitely had a lot of time living this life, and even through all the hardships, we still enjoy it, but we still have a heck of a time sometimes. And in a way, Arizona has made it easier winter wise because, like I was saying, winter is really rough and it's really frustrating. And I'm really glad we don't have to deal with that kind of stress anymore because you had to spend the summer to prep for winter. You're dealing with winter all of winter, only to start summer up again to get ready for winter. And even though the frustrations that came with winter, I still loved it. I loved the homesteading. I loved everything that came with it. And I think that's something that you definitely have to ask yourself is like, all the hardships that come with homesteading, am I still going to love this lifestyle having to deal with those hardships? Because some hardships is just the learning curve. You just have to learn about this thing, learn how to deal with it. Some hardships, like weather, nature, are a continual battle or struggle. It gets easier because you know how to deal with it better, but it's still a thing you have to deal with and kind of battle with. And some years can be better or worse than other years. Warm winters are great, but then on the flip side, we're probably going to get a really nasty next winter. And that can be really stressful just to think about. Like you see the weather and it says -70 tomorrow night. And it's a struggle. um, MG, I love seeing your progress you guys have made on projects. It's truly inspirational seeing how hard you guys both work. I can't whine about the hard work after watching your posts. That's and that's the thing is we all are going to work hard in our own ways and we love this work. Like yes, sometimes it is pretty hard work, but it's something we love doing. It's that silly saying is do what you love and you don't work a day in your life. While I agree, but I also disagree because it is a lot of work. And but it's not like a job, it's just the lifestyle. And I think that's where people acclimate to the life a little bit differently, especially if you're already working a 9 to 5. It's really hard to, because Brandon and I have both worked regular 9 to 5 jobs on and off during our off grid journey. And it's hard. It's really hard to spend, especially when it's like working at night would be great because then I have the whole day, but then you're tired because you should be sleeping half that day, but instead you're taking care of animals. And that's kind of the same thing working a 9 to 5. Depending on how your system is set up, you work your 9 to 5 to come home to have to, it almost feels a little bit more like work. It's more enjoyable work to me in the sense when I was working a 9 to 5. But sometimes you just want to go home and just like sit down for a minute after a really long day at work, but you really can't. Like you really like maybe, you can hang out for a minute, but then you got to go feed and water everybody. You have to do whatever health checks, you have to clean whatever stalls. Depending on, the way your system is, you have to pump water, you have to haul water. How much water do you have? How much water do you need? Do you need to boil water for the dishes? Like, because like for us, everything is still in a sense, we're not as modern as a house is. We don't have yet, hopefully soon ish. We can't just like turn on a faucet and we'll have hot water. If I want hot water, I either have to heat it up in the sun, have to boil it on propane, the biogas, on a fire, and certain things like, oh no, we forgot propane. So now we have to start a fire and we have to cook on a fire for a minute. And I love doing that, but it's a whole nother bit of work that needs to be done to get other work done. Because that's kind of what off grid is. It's you got to do a thing so you can do this other thing so that thing can be taken to finish this other thing. But once a system and a cycle is found, it it goes smoother and it takes time and everybody is going to be different. That's the hardest thing about building a community is everybody is so different with what they can handle when it comes to that aspect. Some people have no issue 9 to 5, come home, rock the homestead. I was like that most of the time. But some people, it just stresses them out. They have tons of trouble mentally, physically keeping up with not just the 9 to 5, but homesteading on top of it. So it's, everybody has to find their own system. Everybody has to find their own way of existing and life and things and know what they can and can't handle. But also, I think anybody can handle anything. It's just if that person really wants to. And I think that's where homesteading really puts people in kind of that category of can they do it or can't they? Because that is a little bit of what homesteading is either can or you can't. And there's some wiggle room in the sense, but that's where it can just be a struggle. Like if you're battling trying to really do this, but you're really like you can't do this, and that's like people who have a 9 to 5. I see just my experiences, that's where people struggle the most is working the 9 to 5 and trying to homestead. And those two things just butt heads really hard, and that's where people have to change tactics a little bit. That's why a lot of homesteaders, they sell their eggs, they raise chickens, just like I do. Raise chickens to sell, raise goats to sell. And sometimes what it is though is people don't want to give up that money comfort to live more simply, I guess is kind of the way to put it. Like some people excuse me, some people are like, oh, I could never live the way you guys do. And sometimes I'm not sure how to take that, but we do. We live very simply. We live off of very little. We've given up a lot for this lifestyle, but what we've given up has allowed us to do these other things that hopefully, as things progress, we'll be able to bring back those things we gave up. But I'm sure many of us know someone who could never give something up. There is something that's a hill they will die on. And sometimes we have to see that in ourselves as well. But that is not maybe someone you'd want in a community. Like it's knowing people and knowing yourself and knowing how you are can give you a fair understanding. We're all human. We all have our crazy quirks and things that set us off. But like for example, someone's a hothead and you know that they're a hothead. You have to really think, is that someone who's going to work in this off-grid system? Because if they can't take criticism, if they can't, take instruction without getting all frustrated, it's are you a hothead? Can you handle those things? Like if you want to become part of a community, it's not even you building a community, it's if you want to be a part of a community. Can you handle the certain things that people are going to expect of you or need from you without getting frustrated? If you can be corrected without getting frustrated about it, if you're willing to learn, if you have the desire to learn, the desire to change, to acclimate, to do something new, because going from city to off grid, some people think it's a pretty easy thing, and it can be. It could totally go super smooth, but I don't really think that's how it goes very often. Like unless you're in like the perfect climate Caribbean where there's just food growing all over and like half the work's already done for you in that matter. But for where you're going to be forced to deal with the heat. Like we were in the tent. We had no choice but just to roast to death. We definitely did what we could to help with that. But if you know that you cannot handle that, maybe you could definitely like acclimate yourself, start hanging out in the sauna or something. But like, you have to know that, okay, so maybe homesteading in Arizona at this community is not going to be my forte because I cannot handle heat for whatever reason. Or same thing with Montana. If you cannot handle cold, you probably don't want to homestead in Montana. So it's not only building community, being on the side of I want to build a community, but it's also can I be part of a community? How well do you get along with people? How well how well can you function in that sense? Because even being in a city, like, sure, you have the community, but are you a community? How much do you truly work together for the benefit of each other? Because that is what community is it's the benefit of each other. There's no me or I. Like, there could be a little bit in the sense, because like they're my chickens, but I raise them for everybody who is part of my communal circle. It's not exactly a community, but I have developed connections with people and have found that that has been the way to build community. It's not focusing on bringing people onto a property and building like a communal village in that sense. It's about meeting people, building connections. And it's kind of the idea of, oh, my neighbor over here, he grows corn and I'm going to grow potatoes. And here's some corn, here's some potatoes. That can be the communal community aspect you might be looking for because some people want their seclusion. They'd rather it just be the two, three people, wife and your couple of kids or your husband and your goats or something like that. But you still want the community. I feel you still should want the community, in the sense of you have someone you could call up, be like, hey, I'm stuck. Can you pull me out today? And oh yeah, let me hold on, just let me grab a beer and I'll come and pull you out of the ditch from, you got stuck almost home and you get stuck or something. Community can be a little bit more further away than everybody on the same property. Um, Scott Scott Cheever having your own channel and Brandon, his makes good sense. Yes, yeah, we definitely, because I did want to like post stuff on Brandon's channel, but his it's a very different channel than mine. And so yeah, we definitely wanted to just do our own channels because then it's kind of fighting the algorithm and all the social media quirks and stuff. But I definitely enjoy having my own channel. JS, self-sustainability is rewarding. Great answer. Thank you. Yes, it's wonderfully rewarding and it's a lot of work before it feels rewarding. For example, if you've never raised chickens for eggs and you get these chicks, you got to raise them all the way up to sometimes a year old before they lay eggs. And then you're just like, finally, there's the reward is coming back. And it can be a whole hard journey until that point. But just because some people only see the reward when they get the chickens. I see the reward as I get to raise these cute little fluffy fuzzy dinosaurs and I have these really cool little creatures who help kind of take care of the property too. You know, it's everybody has their different value in things and I think it's very helpful if even through the struggles you see the reward in that because you're learning, you'll have a way better time. But it's very rewarding and like even just visiting a regular house, I don't like it very much. Like it's weird. Once you've lived this lifestyle and you truly love and enjoy it, you'll go to regular people's houses and you just want to go back home. um, uh, RIS academics, funny how those with less seem to leave a richer life on the whole. That's something I kind of feel a lot of times is that even though we don't have all the fanciest things. We're building this like by ourselves with little money in that sense. Like I feel, no, I'm not trying to dog anybody. Like we just let me state that. But there's a lot of people I'm like, you should be way happier than you are because you're in like such a good place. But we all have our own struggles and our own frustrations. And I think half of that comes from living in the craziness of kind of the city society, all the pressures in that sense. And then you come off grid, all that stress. There's a lot of city life stress that leaves you that you don't have to worry about. And I think that's a huge reason that people who live this lifestyle tend to be happier. Like we all still have our issues and we all have our own mental struggles, but I feel dealing with those things off grid is so much better. And I feel that's one reason people with less, in a sense, we have less to worry about in a society type of way, if that makes sense. um Spite Fairy Fantasy. Good morning from Australia. Well, hello, that's awesome. Someone actually asked me if we were in Australia in like a previous video. So It's definitely interesting. It's morning there and it's 2 o'clock here, so it's definitely a what 8-10 hour difference somewhere in there. Nice difference, but hello, welcome. Yeah, someone else also thought that we were in Africa with just like the landscape and stuff. And in a sense, I always forget how YouTube and social media is really crazy like that, that it's the whole world and not just like the United States that, people from all over watch, and it's super cool. And it's really fun and appreciative, and just it's just cool that other people from all over can share and show and kind of talk about certain things, because they're just relevant no matter where you are. Whether you want to build a community in Arizona or Australia or the Netherlands or something, there's always the same issues that you're going to find no matter where you go when it comes to homesteading, building community, and like life in general too. But there's so many different things to think about and you have to deal with when it comes to community. And I love people, but people can be the worst. And that is that risk of building community, is when you're bringing people together. It's great to bring people together, but people are people and people have their own motives, and depending on their motives can depend on how the community runs. And that's why when you're going to start building a community, like it's hard, because depending on the situation, you want to know someone at least pretty well. And if you know someone well enough to know their problems and their faults, and then thinking, okay, if do I want to build a community with someone who does X, Y, and Z, whatever good or kind of bad thing that may be. But even though you may know this person and they'll be great, they'll be the best community member ever. But then down the road, it just something happens. People have a fight, like humans are humans and they make mistakes, and then you have insanity and the whole community can essentially fall apart. We have some friends who that happened to. Started off peachy, but then like one little thing snowballed into this huge thing and the community essentially fell apart. And it's it's tricky. It's really tricky. And that's why I feel, for us, in the sense, we bought land, we are building for ourselves, we are meeting people around us and in the neighboring, like, actual communities, like the towns. And that is where you start building community. And I would recommend, it's almost like bringing in one person at a time, because if you're bringing in a bunch of new people all at once, you have all these people who, if they've never been off grid, they've never done this kind of thing before, you have all these people who you're going to have to deal with. They have to follow the idea of, okay, everybody works and we're going to split this work up this way, and everybody needs to agree on that and everybody needs to stick with it. And it might work for a minute, but then you might need to make changes. And how well will everybody deal with those changes? And there's so much. It's building a community is just, it's not just bringing people together. It's almost like you have to create like a governmental type of system that, I don't really like the way that sounds. You don't really want a governmental type of system, but you need a system where, like for us, it'd be a democracy, a true democracy, as in, say there's 5 people. We're building a community. We're making a decision. Every single person has to agree. And we have to work and negotiate on whatever we're trying to agree on until everybody agrees on it. But if one person doesn't agree, we're not going to do that thing, because we need everybody to be on the same page. And we have to slowly work with each other through those decisions. And sometimes you just have to put the decision on the table and wait for a while and then come back to it, renegotiate, get everybody on the same page. Because if everybody is not on the same page, the book just gets thrown out. And that's why I feel a lot of communities fall apart, is because everybody is not on the same page. They're not, everybody still has their own kind of selfish wants and goals for why they're doing the community thing. but like some people just expect more than they deserve. And not that anybody really deserves any more or less than anybody, but if someone does all the chicken raising and this person has never even touched a chicken, they probably shouldn't get eggs. But if that person has been, say, plowing the field all day, they have done the work where, of course, they'd get some eggs. But if there's somebody who's like literally just doing nothing and just like gallivanting around the community, like that can't happen because then everybody else has to do the extra work to support that person. And kind of um knowing people the best you can before you bring them into a community, and making sure everyone who comes into the community understands, okay, everybody works. Everybody has to work at least so much every day. And that's where it's the discussion, the talking, and the agreement that everybody needs to agree on and has to be stuck with, essentially. Um, Spite Fairy, I'm caravan life, off gridding instead of homesteading. That's definitely a great way to do it too. Like off grid, homesteading. I'm not exactly homesteading, but it can be done in so many different ways. There's so many different lifestyles that I guess gives one more freedom, and they all come with their what caveats, maybe. I don't can't think if that's quite the right word, but they all come with their pros and cons, and everybody's going to be different. Like I myself, I could never do van life. Like I love the idea. Like I'd love like a van where I could go adventure for a while, but as like the freedom of being homesteading life is my jam. Versus I know people who could never do the off-grid thing because they just love like the van life. um Spite Fairy, trying to find a more permanent place to settle. That is the hardest part, is finding where you want to settle, because it depends on everybody's individual situation. It can be hard to start one place and then it not work out and have to go somewhere else. And that is the tricky part about community building, is if you're someone who is going to a community, maybe that community is not your thing and you have to kind of pack up and start over and find another community that may work better for you, because sometimes that can just be the issue. It's not so much that anybody's the issue, but the way they do things is not how you want to do things. And so sometimes that means you have to check out another community, see if your brain waves vibe just right, and maybe that would be a better community for you to be in. Spite Fairy, just get a man to run it. Too much feelings. I don't know about that, honestly, because just with people I know, like, men can be just as hot-headed and crazy as women. It's an equal thing. Like, I've dealt with terrible man bosses and I've dealt with terrible woman bosses. And so I think it's finding people who you can work with, who can work with each other. That's more of how I think it is when it comes to kind of who runs things. It's not that one person should run things. It's everybody should play a part in how things run. And that's why it's kind of the democracy aspect, where everybody agrees, and you don't have the issues of people disagreeing about how something's being done, because sometimes a different way could be better. And if some person is too hard-headed to know that when they're in lead, and it can cause other rifts. And like, to me, I just wish everybody could get along. I wish it was that easy, but it just takes time. It takes patience. It takes people's ability to adapt. It's understanding kind of human psychology on top of it. Not that I'm like super good at that or anything, but I've had my experiences and understand how people can be, which I'm sure many of us do. And it's hard. Building community is just, it's very hard. Um, Spite Fairy, just feels safe in when I have myself, got my own power. I prefer to live on property. I see. Yep. It's honestly, there is a definite safety feeling when it comes to being kind of more alone and in your own space. And but yeah, having property, having like a place to be and exist is super nice. And that's one reason I love having the property, is because it's this chunk of space that is ours, that we can exist in without the hustle and bustle of everybody else. Uh, home is what you Ernie's Cabin, home is what you make it. Yes, it is. I super agree with that. And community wise, home is what you make it. And if you want a community, you want to make it a home. You want it a place where everybody can be and exist and feel safe and feel heard and understood. And I think that's very important, is existing with people who are willing to work and understand other people, and creating a home. And like the off-grid kind of lifestyle, you're truly creating your home in that sense. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for people to work together, to exist together, to help each other, and creating that home for not just themselves but for the people around them and they care about. Because like, I hope one day we'll find a perfect person who has kind of the same values and stuff as we do, to be a part of, or you know something to that extent. But like I said, community people, to create a community, people don't have to live with you. When people say, I want to build a community, I want to go off grid and build a community, there's already a community there. I don't want to say there for you, but there's already a community there that you can interact with, be communal with, learn from, get help for, help from each other. And that network. It's like community should be thought more of networking with love and care for your surrounding peoples, and not just a community as in everybody lives on the same chunk of property and building houses right next to each other. Because a lot of people went off grid to kind of avoid that. The last thing you want to do is create that on your property, to have a bunch of people in one space. Maybe it's more, everybody gets their own little chunk of property. And that's how you build the community. So everybody has their space and their privacy as well. Like, those kind of things to consider too. Like, if you're going off grid to get away from people, the last thing you want to do is bring a bunch of people to your property. um, Spite Fairy, I'm actually a blacksmith by trade, and at the moment have to sell my tools. I'd make a good team member. I definitely appreciate the offer. One day we may take team member applicants, but as I said, for us, it's, we want to build everything to a point where it sustains just us two, because we know for a fact we have what we need for us. And because we've learned in the past, when you add in another person and they're not pulling their weight, and not saying you would or wouldn't, I'm not trying to say it that way, but it's very hard to input another person when the system isn't yet set up, because the system is still strained by just us. And so once the system can handle us, plus, like, we want just the buffer, a little extra for buffer, it's easier to bring someone in and be like, okay, the system can handle us, now we need to do these specific things, and it makes it easier to be able to build it to handle another person. And so now, okay, the system can now handle 3, and you have that third person to help bring the system up to that point where he has added to the infrastructure, in the sense of, you have, Brandon and I are one building block. We have, so Brandon, me, building block. We are set and stable. And then we add another building block that person is now set and stable. And it's kind of, if that makes sense, it's the slow building up. Like, unless you have the ability to just create a huge system that can handle a bunch of people. But we're doing things slow and steady, and that will make it easier for when we are ready for more people. We won't, the system now that isn't entirely set up won't be strained even more by more people, because it can. One extra person is a lot. People miss that sometimes. It's a whole lot extra of everything. um like it, like eggs. If I'm only getting 5 eggs a day, for example, and Brandon and I both eat 2 eggs a day, and the extras go to the dogs. If we add another person, it's either us or the dogs that don't get eggs anymore. So we need to build up a flock that can have extra eggs. So I need to make sure I'm getting pretend 10 eggs a day. And then I know that if another person comes in, it's not going to put a strain on the eggs that we get. So instead of 5 that sustains just us, I got 10 that can sustain another person. But if I'm selling eggs to make money, that means I need to have even more eggs to sustain that next person. And because that goes for eggs, same thing with meat, milk, what comes out of my garden. What is it sustaining now? How much more do I need to grow to say make profit? And then it's how much more do I need to bring in more people? And that's just, I mean, that's how everything works. It's just a household. You know, how many more groceries are you going to have to buy for one more person? How much more energy and electricity do you need for one more person? And those things stack up like really crazy quick. Like even just having some people over for a weekend, it's nuts. um, um, Spite Fairy definitely have a lot of knowledge and stuff. Like that is something that is always helpful for building a community. Is like not that it should be required for anyone to have a speciality or trade or skill, but it is always like super helpful. Like because for us personally, we've had to learn all the tools of the trade. You know, woodworking, metalworking, gardening, animal husbandry. We've had to learn all these things like pretty much on our own to get to where we are, versus it is pretty helpful when you have someone come in who knows how to do it and can help teach you versus you just trying to figure everything out. Like bringing people in who have a specific skill or trade can definitely help the learning curve of a community, because like learning on your own is amazing and it's fabulous, but when you have like a teacher to help you along, it's very helpful. JS, it's a balance of making an effort to be part of a surrounding community while also respecting each other's own spaces. Exactly. And that is something that trying to put the nice way to word this, that people who come from a city sometimes don't quite understand. Like in city like places, you know, it's not unheard of to go knock on your neighbor's door and to say hello, versus like out here, like off grid community wise, like you don't really do that. You wait for, like you can, but like if someone drives up my driveway and I don't know who that is, I'm like, who is that? Who are you? Why are you here? What are you doing? So it is a huge part of respecting each other's spaces out here, because that's why people do this. They come out here for the space, for the freedom to not have people come into your door all the time. Not that people do that so much anymore, but it's all text and stuff. But you know, we came out here for the space. Some people definitely came out for the space and then no people. And so like, you know, you can have a great person within your kind of network community who you never see. You could never see this person. But say you call them up and you say, "Hey, this thing, oh yeah, he's on it." You know, we've had friends like that. Like rain, snow, day, night. He's like, I know I've only seen you once, but you know, I'm the resident, like, I got a big old truck and I can pull you out of any ditch. And he's like, just don't come over, don't bug me, but if you need me, I'm here. But then you have the other people who are like, you know, they live 2 land parcels down and they do barbecues and fire pits, and there's so many different levels of a community within a community, but it's not like everybody's on the same land parcel community, if that made sense. um what was that? Sorry, something scared my chickens. I have no idea. Sorry. See, that's why I don't like going places as well. And when it comes to having community, having more than one person is nice because even when I'm here, like that scared me. My heart went crazy. I was like, something's eating my chickens. And that can be a good benefit of a community is if you have to go to town, you have other people around to help keep your animals safe. But I was gonna read this next comment. Um, Spite Fairy. My idea is having a communal solar bank that feeds from other people's solar systems when they are at full charge, so people are not using so much power, share into a group feed. Um, and that's definitely and that is something, communal solar banks, communal water catchment, a lot of those are definitely good ideas, but that's where discussion and stuff is still needed because people can be weird about those kinds of things. So like for example, it's three different people, they buy land and they all bought their own solar system, but say, like you said, a communal solar bank, one of them might not like that. They're like, no, these are my panels, these are my batteries, this is my energy. And in a sense, like, I can respect that. Like, I totally get that. And then the other two might be like, okay, we'll just pool our solar. And that's okay too. It's where, like, that's a great idea. It definitely, I super agree with it. But it's still that even building a community, some people will like ideas and some people won't, and that's okay, but it's still working with those individual wants. Like for us, we wouldn't force that person to put their energy into the communal solar bank. If they bought the panels, they bought the batteries, that's their system. But on top of it, it's also the idea of, so you have a communal solar bank, well, what happens when something goes wrong with that bank? Pretend it was one solar system that messed up the whole bank. Does that mean the person whose system messed up has to pay for that and get it fixed? Do you have a communal pool of money that everybody puts into to fix that solar bank? If that makes sense, certain things like they can be great ideas, but you have to think about all these other funny layers like that. Like, if this breaks because this person was using it, but it's communal, is it that person who broke it who needs to pay for it, or because it's a like a community four-wheeler, and say this one person was driving the four-wheeler and something happened and something broke, who's going to pay for that broken thing because it was communal? Are you going to expect the person who broke it, or maybe it wasn't even because of them, maybe the person before like hit a rock and they didn't say anything, and so this other person is going to be blamed for this thing being broken? Who's going to pay for those things when communal things break? And for us, it's a simple matter of, okay, you have a communal four-wheeler, every month everybody puts $5-10 into the pool, so when that four-wheeler breaks, you have the money and the community fixes it. And like there's just all these little nuances when it comes to, you can have a great idea and a great setup, but when something happens, how are you going to deal with that happening, kind of thing. um, our desert shed. That's one of the things I struggle with, is being okay to leave my land because the animals or other things we're dealing with. Each day is like a surprise you get to learn how to deal with. Exactly. Every day is a new journey, a new surprise, a new startle. Cause like, we've got our dogs, we've got the goats, we've got the chickens, and even just going to town for just a couple of hours, like the whole time I'm sitting there like worried, because just for us and our luck, I guess, it's always when we're gone that something happens, whether that be kind of good or bad. But yeah, I definitely don't like leaving our property. um, Spite Fairy, exactly. In emergency, people can override switch to surplus. That's true. Yep, having surplus. No, and I definitely agree. I definitely agree with those kinds of things. And I mean, even though, um, like, and that's kind of the thing is, some people will fix things. Some people want to fix things themselves. Like that's kind of what the issue with the community aspect is. Like, it's super awesome that you can fix the things and get the parts, and like it's super helpful, but some people can be weird. They're like, you aren't touching my solar bank, or I want to do this myself. You know, people are stubborn, and we as people know this. We know that people are a pain, because I'm sure we have our own things that causes us to be a pain. And when you bring those things into a community, like, it really will surprise you. You think you know someone, you go off grid with them, community, something, and those stresses, the way of life, they bring out things in people that you just wouldn't expect. And that is what we have learned is like like knowing someone who you can't touch their thing. You can't touch it. It doesn't matter. If you like, don't even look at it almost, or like, don't fix it, don't touch it, you can't use it, it's mine. And like, and that's fine. That's totally groovy. And then you have other people who just like want to share everything, but then something gets broken and then they get really mad about it, even though things that get used get broken. So that might be someone you're like, okay, I'm not going to borrow things from you, because if something happens to that thing, you're going to be really mad, even though it was really old and almost broken anyway. Like, if that kind of idea makes sense. um, Ernie's cabin, I like to help but expect nothing in return. I have neighbors like that. And that's, like I had said earlier, that's what I feel creating community is kind of about. You know, community is working together without expectation. But it is the idea of reciprocity. Like, it's not, oh, I helped you, you have to help me the next time I need help. It's, they helped me, and say I need help with something, they go, oh, I can't, and that's fine. People have their own lives and their own things. But it's not being angry when they can't just turn around and help you back kind of idea, because that's something we've definitely dealt with, is people's expectations on like immediate return when it comes to helping, versus us, like, I just try to help in the little whatever ways that I can, because sometimes I can help out more than I can other times. And those times when I can't help with nothing and I need help, there's someone else who will help me, and then I help that person, and that person helps this other person who needed my help earlier, but I couldn't help because I needed help. And it's kind of like this weird web of like back and forth reciprocity is what creates community and creates bonds of being able to help and trust and know that you have a group of people around you who just want to help. Like, to me, that is what community is. Like, you just want to. Like, you see a friend, like, oh man, I can't do this, and you're like, oh shoot, let me come over, and like, we'll get this done for you really quick. And it usually turns out that you have a little meal and a barbecue and you hang out for a while, and it's more about the community relationship than it is about the expectation of give and take a little bit. Um, Spite, Spite Fairy Fantasy. I banned my mom's boyfriend from touching my chainsaw. He sharpens it lopsided, thinking he's helping. Yeah, and sometimes that's what it is sometimes people will do their best to help, but they might not be the best person to do that particular thing. And that is where in communities, boundaries do need to be set. Like, say you have tools, and you say, you can use my tools, but ask me, don't sharpen them. I will do the sharpening on my own tools so that someone may not make them lopsided. But, and that's where it gets really kind of confusing is, you don't want to act one way, but you kind of need to at the same time. Like, hey, this is mine. Don't do this. Ask me to use it. And you might have one person who follows that to a T, but then you have another person who doesn't, and they'll just go and use it, and they'll say, well, you let them use it, and they say, and then you're like, well, they asked. They told me they were going to use it, and they didn't do the thing I told them not to do. And like, sometimes that's a recurring problem, and that person may just not be working well with the community. And that is something that you also need to think about is, how do you kick someone out of a community if they are that type of problem, or not that type of problem, but if they're not, kind of contributing to the rules kind of set in the beginning. You know, though, and that's a really hard thing. How do you remove someone from a community? Like, and there's so many different situations, but you have to, that's something you have to decide as a community that you all have to agree on. Like in the beginning, if you say, okay, if you do X, Y, and Z and it doesn't get better, you were ixnayed from the community. And if someone can't agree to that, then they probably don't want them to be part of the community anyway. But then it's something that you have to actually follow through with, or you're going to have that issue forever, kind of thing. Um, Spite Fairy Fantasy, that's how working at a local corner store was like for me growing up in the village. I know everyone. People ask me who's an electrician and do you want reused parts or got new ones? And then they say, and you can't afford it, and they will do it anyway, and I'll owe them a favor. Yep, yep. Um, and then Ernie's Cabin, I'm a plumber by trade and love setting up water systems off grid. I find it others not so much. Systems off grid. I find it others not so much. I'm not sure what you meant by that last part, but I think I do. But no, that's exactly what it is. It's like that kind of small village aspect. I grew up in a really tiny town in Harlow where everybody knew everybody, and that's how it was. Oh, do you need a plumber? Oh, I know a plumber. Oh, hey, I took this part out of this, and it's not like bad, but like, do you need it? Do you want it? Do you know anybody else who needs it? And it's really, that is what community is. It's just doing things because you can, without, you know, everybody expects something. You know, they expect to be paid back pretty quick after doing whatever they're doing. Versus to me in community, it's just wanting to help each other for the sake of doing it. And like, I think that's a big joy I get, I guess, in the sense is like, oh, this person needs help and I just did it. And then I'm like, oh, that felt really good because they got what they needed. And like, in a sense, it has to do with me like, oh, yay, I helped, but it's more like, yay, they got what they needed and they're more set up and they have the ability to help others. That's almost what it is. It's helping others to have the ability to help others. That's community. That is what I think community should be. And you build great relationships that way too. Like, yeah, you just build great relationships, great connections, and the more you help others, it's like one of those, you know, laws of the universe, whatever vibes, you know, your vibe attracts your tribe. And if you're good and helpful and they're also good and helpful, not saying to you specifically, like hopefully they do, you know, little reciprocity, but I think those are the best people to create a community with, is people who love to be helpful just for the sake of being helpful, to help other people be able to help other people. Yes, definitely when it comes to recovering from many issues we all face, mental issues, depression, I definitely think that helping others is a great way to overcome that because it's just because. And I think that's what makes good people in a sense, is when people like to do things for other people just because. And and then it's helpful for you yourself. Like it's a fulfilling aspect of kind of just like the humanness we all have, is that, you know, helping people, it's out of love for not just ourselves but for others without expectation. And that's what community is. It's love and helpfulness without expecting it back. It's great if you do, it's nice, it's helpful, but it's not required. um, Community sounds like communism. I can agree with that. But, you know, we've always, I guess to me, when it comes to, I'm not a political person. I am an earthly creature trying to survive on this planet of insanity. And when I come like understanding political parties, communism, Republican, Democrat, whatever the heck it is, there's good aspects in all of them. They're just all taken to the wrong extremes. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it kind of is. But it's also just being human and getting along, and it's not about control, it's about being helpful. And it's about being self-reliant, self-able, and without, in a sense, like, in the sense of my understanding, communism is forced. Community is by choice. I think that's the main difference. You want to do these things because you want to and not because you have to, I think. I think that's the only way I can really describe that. um, I think it's more like the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child." A mass. See, that is kind of the idea. It takes a village to raise a child, and I super agree with that in the sense of, like, for example, the small town I grew up in, I couldn't get away with nothing. If I went to the store and had a bad attitude with the cashier, that cashier would tell my mama and I'd be in trouble, and I'd learn to respect that cashier. Like, in a sense, like, if your kid doesn't grow up in the real world, they're going to have a lot of trouble when they hit that real world. And a village is what kind of helps a kid learn the real world. Like, you know, trying to think of like an example. It takes a village to raise a kid, because if that kid, it's only the parents and the kid, that kid is not going to know how to function in the world. But if that parents and the kid have a village and they all work together, that kid is going to be able to work with the world and society better because they know people. They've worked with people, they know how to respect people, they know how to be helpful, how to ask questions, how to learn, understand that there are people who know more than they do, and it's great to learn from those people. Not saying you have to do exactly what they say, but it's learning, it's growing, it's existing together with the desire to want to help each other. Like, I think that's kind of how the world would be a lot better if we all just wanted to help each other and actually did it and followed through without expectation. Um, so Spite Fairy, the idea is to be less complicated, no holding grudges. It's definitely hard to hold a grudge in a small town. In a city, people will litter rubbish because everyone else does, and in a small community, if you dump your stuff, people get upset. No, and that is definitely a big thing. The bigger area you get into with more people, the more you see the hmm it's like the garbage. People in a bigger city, they put their garbage, whether they're throwing it on the street or in a dumpster, it gets taken away and you never have to think about it again. Versus when you're off grid, you are looking at that garbage. You have to either, you have to put it in a trailer to haul to the dump. You have to either be upcycling it, you have to be taking care of it. It is your responsibility to care for it. And kind of the small village community aspect, definitely, that is at the forefront, that these things are your responsibility. And if they don't get done, it causes problems. Whether that be the trash gets everywhere, or an animal gets into the trash, or, it ends up just, spread everywhere because of the wind. And that is, the difference between, say, city and a small town. If this small town relies on, say, the farms, like, the whole community will help that farm be successful, because if that farm isn't successful, neither is the town. Versus in a city, you don't have to think like that, because the farm brings the food to the store, and the store is never going to run out of food. And so you don't have to think about those things. That food is not your responsibility. And that is one of the biggest issues when it comes to being off grid, is everything is your responsibility. Everything. From making sure you put gas in the vehicle, because if you don't put gas in that vehicle, you're not going to have enough to get back to town. Making sure you have enough water. And if you run out of water, you're in trouble because you didn't put gas in the car and you don't have enough gas to go get water. Um, and when you're going to build a community, it's going to be a learning curve for everybody. So you do have to give everybody some leniency and some time to grow and acclimate. But if they're unable to grow and acclimate and learn the lifestyle, it can be really hard to build a community with people who don't want to grow. Like, I want to build a community. Well, you need to build on yourself too. And if you can't build on yourself too and build and grow with the community, maybe it's not the right lifestyle for that person or even yourself. You have to be real with yourself too. Um, Ernie's Cabin. There's a lot of good people out there. They're just hard to find. And that's definitely what it is. Is there's plenty of people out there that will fit with whatever anybody's idea of community is, but they are very hard to find because people have their own wants, their own goals, their own maybe sinister plans, and they can hide it very well. And it's hard. It's hard to build community. And even though saying all this, like, to me, it's build a community, but don't be so quick to bring people together in one spot in that sense of community. Um, Work with the community that's already in your area. And if there's no community in your area, that's where you may be the start of creating community in your area. Because we are very lucky when it comes to Montana and down here in Arizona. There's definitely uh, like, just for example, there's this really cute little kind of farmers market, like little storefront. It's all community. People from the community bring their products in, and that's where you either, like, that would be where I would buy stuff, make friends there, maybe bring in my own product to sell there, and become part of the community that's already here. Because you never know, you might meet someone who goes, "Oh my gosh, you're off grid." Like, are you building a community? And you can slowly meet people from the community who want to build the type of community that you want. And I think that's the better way to do it, is people who are already part of a community in a sense are the people you want to bring into your community. Um, Spite Fairy, especially on the internet, good people are hard to find. It's like wading through a sewer to find a friend. I can agree, and that's one thing that always really surprises me. Like, I'm on lots of like Facebook pages, but there's this one in particular. Uh, I can't remember the name, but essentially you go, "Hey, I'm this person. I just bought land here, or I have land here. I want people to come and live on my property with me." And I love the idea, but it's a terrible idea. Just because you don't know who these people are. You don't know what their intentions are. If things don't work out, people who know where you are, know your setup, know the system, they are the worst enemies as like an off-gridder you can have, because one day they know that nobody's there, they're going to come up, they're going to cut some cords to your solar and your solar's now ruined. Or they could bust your water holding tank, or they could, there's a million things that people could do that could absolutely decimate the homestead life you've been building. And that's why we're very careful with who we bring to the property. And that's not to judge anyone, but at the same time, we're judging everyone, because we are human and we know what humans are capable of, and we've met people who have evil machinations, and you just gotta be careful. You just gotta be careful, especially on the internet. Um, Spite Fairy, my happy elf village in my mind is a circle or round houses with a central 3-story big windmill for mechanical advantage and more free power and water pumping. Heck yeah, that sounds super awesome. uh, I'm lucky country Australia doesn't have a vandalism culture, but it's infecting cities now with migration issues. And that's the thing, is everywhere's going to have their own challenges, and some places don't have to worry about certain things and some places do. And that is kind of the scary kind of worrying part, is like, sure, maybe vandalism isn't like a big thing in your area, but if you were to build a community and someone ends up being very unhappy for some reason. I mean, there's a million different scenarios I'm sure we can all think of. It's not so much like a vandalism culture, is that individual people can do evil things and bad things because they didn't get their way. And that really comes out when it comes to like the off-grid homesteading thing. that we've seen when it comes to trying to build a community in that way, if that also makes sense. Um, JS, what security measures do you all take on your off-grid property without giving away too much, of course? um, Honestly, we're home most of the time. That is our number one kind of security measure, is either one or both of us. We're usually home. We work from home for the most part. Uh, the only times we do go to town is when we need to go to town or get water. And it's been kind of a process of getting to that point. Not only it we live off of very little. We don't need a lot of money, so we don't really need to be away from home too often. But we also have our dogs who are they we do need true livestock guardian dogs. They're more very good alarm systems. So if someone's coming up, they bark. Except the cows. We want them to bark at the cows, but they don't bark at the cows. But they'll bark at people. But we are our security measures. I truly feel that people are your best security measure. But then, cameras, we want to do like just like I think everywhere you should and we want to have more cameras. Either that or like there's nifty little like motion sensor alarms that you could get. I'd like a few of those because and you can set their sensitivities and stuff, like the lonely alarm if there's a car, or if it's someone the size of a person, but we have cows, so it'd probably go off every time the cows came. But that'd be okay too. But of course, fencing in the future, I really hope one day in the future we can afford like a full electric fence. That's not so much for people, but a fence just helps deter people that much more. But other security measures is being as, I guess, gray man as you can. Like, we don't like running generators because then people can know where we are. We try to avoid having tons of light during the night because people can, know where you are. Because our problem does have kind of theft problems a little bit. Not so much our exact area, but off yonder has a little bit more of that issue. But like to me, every security measure is a great security measure to have. It's simply having the money and the finances for that. So that is something we're working on saving up on, um, as well as just making it harder for someone to get onto your property. Like dead hedges are a great way to do things. I really want to do cactus barriers. Have like a nice 3-4 feet width of cactus that's maybe yay tall. Like, how many people want to try to, dodge through a bunch of cactus? So, like, you can have very natural security measures as well. I know a lot of people, not that I know a lot of people, but I know some people who will tie like aluminum soup cans to a string on their fence. So if someone tries to climb their fence, it's going to rattle and jangle. And having something that makes sound, even if you can't hear it, tends to deter people. I know, like Montana, I mean, it's kind of the same here, but not quite as much. But like Montana, people are shooting guns all the time. I mean, like we had a neighbor when he was having a fun day, I mean, 1,000 rounds or something like that. And in a sense, that's a great security measure, um, kind of by proxy. If you have people who are shooting guns all the time around you, like people are gonna know, okay, these people have guns. We probably don't want to be sneaking around here, and that kind of aspect. So I know some people who once a week they make a bunch of noise with their Second Amendment rights, and that helps deter people. Um, so like for me, I like trying to implement all different security measures, to keep would-be bad people on their toes. um, uh, Spite Fairy, bow and arrow and a big dog. Yep, yeah. I really want to get a big ol' Anatolian. They're great dogs. Um, Ernie's cabin. I live so far out in the forest. I don't have to worry about people. And that's the greatest thing is when you are out in the boonies. A lot like we are. Like we're decently in the boonies, and on top of it, we're Arizona, so it's like super hot and dry and awful. And so that kind of deters people from wanting to go too far off the beaten path to mess with people's property. Um, Spite Fairy, same Ernie. I grew up in the woods without even having a functional door on the lock. Yep. And that's kind of what it is. It depends on the area. I mean, that's really what it comes to. Like, because in a sense, there's also that slight drawback. Being in the boonies, sure, it makes it so more people aren't going to happen by your place. They're less likely to try to sneak up because there's nothing around. You're less likely to be found or to be targeted. But like it's always not like something I truly worry about, but it's also like we're out in the boonies and if somebody wanted to like mess with us kind of thing, like we're out in the middle of nowhere. But that's where it's nice because we are kind of like a Second Amendment state. We have dogs. We're here most of the time. There's other people around us that we know who are pretty good at. Once again, it's that community thing, knowing your neighbors, because if you meet your neighbor, they're going to watch out for your property and you're going to watch out for their property because you both don't want nobody messing with your properties. So having community, all, everybody's looking out for each other is a great form of security as well. Because up in Montana, if Brandon and I were gone and someone drove up to our property, like pretty quick someone would call and be like, hey, someone's at your property. Be like, oh yeah, what's that car look like? And they'd tell you, be like, oh, that's my uncle or that's my friend, or I don't know, can you walk over there and ask them what they're doing? So that's another great security measure, is knowing your neighbors, even if they are far away, because if you live out in the boonies and there's only like one house between you and wherever, that one house can be like, yeah, I saw this strange black, truck looking like it was going up towards your place. Do you know who that was? And then you can kind of keep in your mind, like, oh, there's been this strange black truck. I'm going to keep my eyes open for that. So even if you're not like direct neighbors, you can still watch out for each other in that fashion. Um, Plant blackberries under your windows is a traditional English cottage thing. Ooh, I might have to do some of that. I've been thinking about blackberries. I don't know how well they do. Like it's so hot and dry here. Pots are kind of tricky. So that's something that I've been trying to work with when it comes to potted plants, cuz I like having some pots and plants where I can move them about. But that would be cute, but they'll probably just end up being in our greenhouse though too, cuz we want lots of plants all over the place. um, oh, enjoy getting the icy. Yes, yes. Well, and that's one reason like we kind of build our houses the way we do. It's really hard to infiltrate the house without making it known to us or the dogs. Like it's a pretty small house in that sense too, so that's a bonus for us. No, yeah, that's and honestly for us in Arizona, like I love the blackberry bush idea, but we'd probably go for cactus. Cactus in the windowsills. Nobody would try to get in. um but that is the thing, being really creative with security, as well as you do have to keep that aspect of security in mind if you're building a community, because I don't want to say all people are bad, but all people have the ability to be bad. And so, um, trying to think like how to word this. Um, People can be sneaky. People within a community can try to steal things from other people. And so there is that aspect of you do want a type of security within the community for the community, not from outside forces, but kind of the community itself. And that sucks because I don't want to say you can't trust anybody, but you can't trust anybody all the way. I recommend to always have a slight grain of salt because we as humans should know how humans think. Like we've all had probably not the best thoughts, causing some trouble kind of idea, like because that's how we function. We know human nature because we are humans, and human nature can be really awful, but it can also be really good. But it's also understanding that human nature can be awful, and you do want to have some sort of plan in place for those scenarios. Like, for example, you want to kick someone out of the community and they say, I'm going to destroy your community. Well, what are you going to do about that? How are you going to deal with that situation? How are you going to handle that? Like, do you have the cameras to make sure if he does try something, you'll catch him on camera doing something? Restraining orders. I mean, you could get like, get the government involved in that kind of thing. But like security is really important, not just for the security of the homestead in general, but if you're building a community, the security inside the community itself. Of course, you want to build a community with people you can totally trust. But for example, if the world went really crazy and the community's a little hungry because things are a little short, hunger makes people do crazy things, and you need to kind of have an idea how to deal or prepare for those kinds of situations, if that makes sense. Kind of more of a prepper mentality, but I feel it's a important mentality to kind of have. Um, Spite Fairy, yep, my own family traumatized me, traumatized my mental health, and then gaslit the courts, pointing the finger at me, trying to frame me because I started being honest with support workers. Yep. And that's the thing is you can have family do you can have your own family troubles at home, go off grid, and then they could try to cause you troubles. Like there's so many different layers to the craziness that people will do and how you have to deal with them. Yep, and definitely no contact, when it comes to people like that. Uh And it sucks because you do always want family. Like, because when I think about it, like, okay, I'm off grid, I'm self sustainable, the world goes crazy, okay, all my family. But then I really think about it, and I'm like, it's probably not a good idea. Just because family is the hardest. Family is the hardest thing. Like, I'm pretty sure 90% of us know that family is the worst kind of thing to have to deal with in that manner. Um, and that's just people. That's the thing is your family is just people. So like if your family's nuts, like not calling anybody's family is nuts, but if your family is your family, people are going to be the same. Other people are going to do those same things, maybe in different ways. And it's really, when it comes to building community, it's being prepared for anything. It's being prepared for human nature, and human nature is highly unpredictable, especially when you come into a self reliant type of space where you need to be able to deal with these things on your own. And if you're building a community, of course, with help of the community, but being prepared for human nature. It's going to be the biggest struggle when it comes to building community because you have no idea how people are going to act when things get hard. And that can put you in a lot of tight spaces. And really think about those aspects of human nature when you want to build a community. And of course, you want to be looking on the good, amazing, loving, helpful side of humanity, but you really need to look at the flip side. Because if you do not put that flip side into the equation of building community, understanding how terrible people can be, how ignorant, how egotistical, how self centered people can be, you're going to have a really hard time building community that turns successful. And that's not to deter anyone from trying to build community, but it's a serious kind of issue when it comes to building community is human nature. It is going to be one of the biggest battles when you're building community is dealing with people because people are amazing, but also they are not. And when building community, you really, really want to be prepared for that fact. JS, I learned it's good to find your own like minded people, then force family to get on board with sustainability and preparedness. I won't give up on family, but I'm realistic. No, that's very true. Um, uh, it's definitely not forcing anyone to be off grid self sustainability. It is definitely finding like minded people. But even then, that is where we have learned that's still really tricky too, because we have found like minded people. But then when you try to incorporate them into you have a system set and you're trying to incorporate someone else with a new system, or for them it's a new system, and even though they're very like-minded, there still might be headbutting, and that's just where hopefully communication, understanding, and learning comes in, and you can work through those issues. But even like-minded people, it's still the human nature aspect. They can start off very like-minded, and once you get into things, you find out that yes, they're like-minded, but they don't have the same morals, the same goals, the same values for certain things, and it can still make it pretty tricky. I missed a comment up here too. Esther May, I have been estranged from mine as well, going on 30 years. Hard but worth it, and staying healthy and alone. I dig it. And that's something I know a lot of people are like, I'm going off grid, getting away from my family, and it brings them a hardship of leaving family, but it's also very healing as well. And in a sense, I can relate to that in my own journey is that, getting away from certain things has been very healing, especially when you put a couple thousand miles between. um, Spite Fairy, there's a chance I might be able to move to the farms just across the river from my backyard. That'd be super awesome. Like, especially like I love working on farms and stuff, especially when it's like somewhere you grew up and you can kind of hold on to that nostalgia of childhood. That would be super awesome. That's where your own space is important, even in community. No, exactly. And that's why, not that I'm against community where you all live like close together. Um, but I do think that, space in a community is like literal space in a community. Because if you're a community, you're with these people all the time. You're with them all the time. And if you don't have the ability to go far enough away where you're not going to see them, you're not going to hear them, it can be hard. Excuse me, hiccups. It can be really hard and stressful on one's mental health, like uh, being able to, if you have 40 acres, everybody gets 10 acres. You have your own true space where you can do your own thing, but you're all still close enough to be that kind of community you want. I'm not saying you have to, like, not saying it has to be something exactly like that, but making sure people do have their own space because people can just drive each other nuts. And it's not even that nobody's getting along, it's that everybody has been dealing with everybody for too long. And especially if you're thinking in long term, if you're going to be a community until everybody dies, you want to make sure you have your own good elbow room, your own, whether it's just you, whether it's your family, you have your own space to exist and be away from everybody. Like, I think all of us humans are like, I don't want to deal with a single human right now. That can be hard if you're in a community. So you definitely want to make sure you have your own space. Um, Esther May, yes, it's liberating, all those miles. I agree, I agree. Spite Fairy, depending on the time of year, I leave my keys, go to the store, have, sorry, the sun. Depending on the time of year, I leave my keys in the ignition and I come out of the store. Oh yeah, no, definitely. I grew up in a town that was like that. You didn't have to worry about anything, and like that is where you do want to like choose where you're gonna build community wisely. Safer area, good idea. Less safer area, probably not a good idea. Ernie's Cabin, LOL, people are as bad as goats. I agree. I agree. Sometimes those goats, they just need to go to the other property for a while because I don't want to be around them anymore. Especially during rut season. But I think though I still like goats a little better. I like even ornery goats. I like a little better than some people. Spite Fairy also had a really cool giant black dog who was like a therapy dog. Uh, the dog would jump in and drive with you some days. Had his own dog day bag. Oh, I love that. Heck yeah. I wish I would bring my dog somewhere, but they're like good boys, but they're naughty boys, and they're definitely meant to protect the chickens. They definitely hang around the chickens, not like loose because they can't quite be trusted, but they're my chicken protectors, and if I bring them with me, I'm like extra worried about my chickens. But they're gonna be retiring age pretty soon. Then they'll get lots of dog rides because I don't have to worry about my chickens. But I can't believe how long I've been talking. It's been like 2 hours almost now, which is great. I'm glad that I've been able to blab about building community for a chunk of time. Because like I know there's been a lot of repeats and just kind of re-explaining things, but the biggest thing, like the biggest takeaway is building community is great. It's a great idea. It's really hard to execute. And not because building community is hard, it's because people are hard. People are wonderful and fantastic, but they're also mean and evil and egotistical. And it can be really hard to filter out the good and the bad and how much, you're going to have to put up with a little crap from everybody. But how much are you going to put up with when it comes to the community sense? What is safe to put up with? What is sustainable to put up with from somebody? And sometimes someone just can't pull their weight for a minute, and that's okay. We all have our bad days where we just can't function. We get sick, we get hurt. Not talking about those instances. I'm talking about some people just don't want to do the work. Some people have egos that think they don't need to do anything, and those aspects. And it can be really hard to build community working with people's personalities. And you can find people who are very similar, and it could go really great, or maybe not. And it's truly a journey of persistence, perseverance, and just being careful. It's great to build community. It's really hard to build community, especially the community that you imagine in your mind, because we have these romantic thoughts of what community is, what it can become, and the journey to actually get there can be really hard and painful and frustrating. And I want to make sure everybody who wants to build community understands that you might have to try to build a community 10 times before you actually have a group of people who are going to be your diehards. They're going to do this. They're going to work together. They're going to function together and can do it together. Um, um, Thank you. I'm glad you liked the live. Um, Esther May, I like this discussion as well. Good listening while arranging flowers. Oh, very awesome. And JS, thanks for all your insight and advice today. Have a great week. Forgiveness, Esther May, forgiveness is a forgotten component. No, that is very true. And like I said, it's dealing with people, what you can handle, what you can't, what you can let slide, what you can forgive. It's it's practice. It's a practice of building community to create community. And like I said, I want everybody to be a fabulous, wonderful community. I just want us all to get along. But we know as humans that it's really hard to get along with everybody. Some people are going to like you and some people aren't. And that's okay either way. But I'm really glad you all joined the live. And I'll probably put a poll out if we want to talk about buying land and just kind of talking about buying land, or if you have ideas of what you'd like the next live to be talked about, because I'll just kind of ramble on like this and answer questions and whatnot. But any ideas, once I post the live, if you want to come back and put a suggestion. Otherwise, I'll probably do a post. But I'm thinking buying land will be the next live, unless someone unless I see some better ideas. But so put some ideas for live topics in the comments and try to be like is kind of make it a broad subject so that I could talk a while. But buying land hopefully will be next, and I appreciate everybody for joining my very long live. Thank you all for coming, and have a fabulous day, whether day or night or morning or evening. I hope you have a good time. Peace.